Welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast. Moving into a segment here talking about the idea of the G League Ignite. This is something that Adam Silver was asked about during All-Star Weekend. He said the future is still sort of to be seen. It seems like it might be a little bit murky. So in case you don't know, the G League Ignite is a program that the NBA first came up with, or introduced at least, in 2020. It was to add a team among the G League, which is the NBA's developmental league, almost the semi-pro teams like in the NHL or the MLB, and where prospects could come straight out of high school and join this one specific team, the G League Ignite, and immediately make money for their basketball talent. This was in place of going to college and playing their 1 year there, because the NBA requires at least one post-high school year before you can be eligible to enter the NBA draft. And at the time that this program was created, there were not the rules surrounding NIL, where athletes were able to make money off of their name, image, and likeness, where there were a handful of cases of programs, individual players getting caught for receiving money in order to go to a school. Right around this time, it was a big storyline where James Wiseman, who ended up being the number 2 overall pick in that 2020 draft, he was ruled ineligible for the majority of the Memphis season, where he was playing his freshman year after dealing with some injuries in high school as well. He comes in, and it was found out that he received some money to go to the school, play under Penny Hardaway, and he was ineligible for the rest of the year. And the NBA sort of stepped in with this Ignite program and said that they could provide these athletes an opportunity. And a lot of these athletes, especially at the time coming out of high school, where they needed money, they wanted to help provide for their family potentially. And the way that Adam Silver put it this past weekend when he was asked about it, the Ignite team was filling a hole that gave prospects an opportunity to make this money while still being eligible to play in the NBA draft a year later. The Ignite was launched in April of 2020, and they took place during the 2020-2021 season, where they would get these developmental prospects together. They would play together with a couple other veteran players surrounding them as well, and they would face off against the other G League developmental teams of the other remaining NBA teams. I don't think every single NBA team, especially at that time, had a G League team, but play against, actual professional basketball players that were on two-way contracts or were trying to, play basketball in America and find a role into the NBA. And we saw a very interesting turn of events where about a year later, it was the NCAA versus Alston Supreme Court case, in which it was ruled that the NCAA could no longer prevent athletes from making money off of their name, image, and likeness. And it sort of changed the, again, necessity of the G League Ignite, because as Silver put it, it was filling a hole that was no longer there. But even still, the Ignite has had a handful of successful individual prospects that have come out of the program. We've seen 4 lottery picks through the 3 seasons that this has taken place. We saw Jalen Green, Jonathan Kuminga, Dyson Daniels, and Scoot Henderson all go in the top 10 of the past 3 NBA drafts. And we are likely to see at least one more this year with Matas Buzelis, and could possibly be 2 as well. Ron Holland is another prospect. He's out for the rest of the season with a thumb injury, but we are probably going to see that number of 4 lottery picks increase even more this upcoming NBA draft. Now, The issue with the program is it hasn't really helped develop prospects in the way that they were initially hoping to do so. Because you're bringing in a lot of these guys that need to develop, and you look at the names that they had, such as Jalen Green and Jonathan Kuminga, very talented players, but there was a lot of raw talent with them, and you're trying to develop them while also focusing on the other guys that are surrounding them in that same team. And we saw other guys, names that might not stick out quite as much, but Isaiah Todd, Leonard Miller from this past draft class, where they were hoping to also boost their stock playing against a little bit of elevated opponents in the G League series. And it just, again, the way that this basketball was played, it was a lot of looking out for yourself first. It was players looking to boost their individual stock. So there was a lot of selfish play, a lot of lack of team basketball. I think that Jalen Green has always had the talent, but it has been a little bit of an adjustment for him, actually adjusting into a team setting in the NBA. And while I think he has tons of talent, we still haven't seen necessarily the perfect fit in with the rest of the Houston Rockets team, and one that this year is looking to make a little bit more of a jump, play some more team first ball after adding veterans in Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks. So with the number of developmental prospects that they have in the league, it also resulted in some of these players not getting enough playing time that they thought they were signing up for. So we've seen some of these guys. Leonard Miller is somebody, he was drafted by the Timberwolves this past year in the second round. I think he's another guy that has a ton of raw potential. I really liked him coming into the draft, and it's tough because he hasn't really played the team structured, mature game that these players are taught during college basketball. And there are lessons, obviously going to school outside of lessons in classes. There are lessons on the court of having that shared goal, playing unselfish basketball, everybody working together, that just hasn't really played out necessarily in the G League Ignite program. So the existence of this program has been a little bit harmful to some of these guys, and I think that in turn it's also hurt the product of college basketball a little bit, because you look at college basketball, there just isn't really that same level of star power that we saw prior to the introduction of the G League Ignite team. And I don't think that the Ignite program is fully responsible for it, but if you look at the couple draft classes right before this took place, you had box office teams. Obviously, you can go back in history and list hundreds of names, but in the years directly prior to the Ignite program, you had that Duke team with Zion, who himself was a spectacle, but he also played alongside RJ Barrett and Cam Reddish. John Morant was in that same year, and he goes out with this Murray State team and wins a tournament game. Anthony Edwards at Georgia, and Georgia wasn't even good at the time, but he himself was, he stood out physically. You could see this guy can be a number one pick and a star in the NBA, and we just don't really see that quite the same anymore, where there are a few names in college basketball right now that you could definitely see potentially go in the top three. Cody Williams for Colorado, Jacoby Walter for Baylor, Rob Dillingham for Kentucky, all very good players and should definitely be on, lottery picks on NBA teams this upcoming season. But there's just not the same level of excitement that we saw in college basketball in past seasons. So in a way, Buzelis is a great player. He grew up in America. He played in Chicago. He went to Brewster Academy in New Hampshire, and he was in the All-American game. But, I've seen one G League game myself because I never even know when they're on. And it's just having these stars with the power. Now, the 2024 class isn't exactly seen to be the strongest of recent draft classes anyways, but I just feel like with the viewership and the weight that comes with college basketball, and the NCAA has never been my favorite organization. I don't know anybody who's, team NCAA and a lot of the things that they do, but college basketball just means something. And it feels like it's meant less. And we've been going through this stretch during the All-Star break where there's no NBA. So I've been watching a lot of college basketball and I'm intrigued by it, but I'm not moved by it the same way because I don't think that there's that same level of star power. So, ultimately, I think that the Ignite was a great idea at the time of its inception, but it doesn't really have the same role anymore than we needed. And these players can make money in college now. So not every prospect wants to go to school for a year. I think that, we should maybe encourage kids to go get an education. But if a prospect just wants to focus on basketball, I don't think you can take that away from them. So we should be able to find some other way to work this out. The NBL, the National Basketball League in Australia, has found a little bit of good balance where they spread out these prospects across different teams in the league, and that also requires the league itself helping to cover some of, if not all of, the contracts that these prospects get paid. And we've seen a handful of different players graduate from that. We saw LaMelo Ball, we saw Ousmane Dieng, Josh Giddey, names like that. So RJ Hampton as well is another one. So, the G League could try and incorporate some sort of a similar idea. I don't have all of the answers necessarily, but I do think that it's something that needs to be worked on one way or another, because I think that while the idea of the Ignite program definitely, was well thought out and was in search of helping these prospects, I don't think it's been quite as beneficial as we were hoping when it was introduced. So those are my takes on the G League Ignite program. Again, it's not that Adam Silver said that this is going to be ended soon. He just said he's not sure what the future of it is. And selfishly, because I like college basketball, I would prefer to see some of these players make their way into college basketball, because I don't know, I just feel like Jalen Green would have been such a fun college basketball player, I feel like. And who knows, maybe in turn we could have also seen him sort of be a little bit more refined as a prospect. That's all hypothetical, up for debate, but it's just something that I am interested in, and I'm curious to see how the league plays it from here. So on that note, we are going to be taking our final break. When we come back on the other side, we're going to be talking some NFL, where there were some very interesting stories that came out yesterday about Nick Sirianni and sort of what helped spark that downhill spiral of the Eagles season last year. So stick with us. We will be right back after the break.